بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. خدایا جهان پادشاهی تو راست، ز ما خدمت آید خدایی تو راست. پناه بلندی و پستی تویی، همه نیستند آنچه هستی تویی. همه آفریده است بالا و پست، تویی آفریننده هرچه هست. خرد را تو روشن بصر کرده ای، چراغ هدایت تو بر کرده ای. جهانی بدین خوبی آراستی، برون زان که یاری یری خواستی. خداوند مایی و ما بنده ایم، به نیروی تو یک به یک زنده ایم. رهی پیشم آور که فرجام کار، تو خشنود باشی و من رستگار. با نام و یاد خداوند بخشنده مهربان سلام عرض می کنم خدمت شما مسئولین، مدیران، اساتید، فعالین در صنعت و دانشجویان عزیز. من فاطمه شمسیانفرد حضور شما عزیزان رو به اولین کنفرانس بین المللی و سومین کنفرانس ملی مدیریت ساخت و پروژه خیر مقدم عرض می کنم. جا داره در ابتدای عرایزم نهایت تأسف و تعلم خودم رو به علت حادثه پلاسکو اعلام بکنم و در همین راستا از تمام محققینی که در این گرد همایی حضور دارند تقاضا داشته باشم بر موضوعاتی مثل چرخه حیات پروژه، مباحث تعمیر و نگهداری و در مجموع پست کانستراکشن تمرکز بیشتری داشته باشند تا انشالله در آینده شاهد چنین حوادث ناگواری نباشیم. از محضر شما عزیزان اجازه میخوام تا به یکی از اساتید بین المللی که در جمع ما حضور هم دارند هم خوش آمدگویی عرض کنم. I welcome our international guest, Professor Milan Radoslavlevich. I wish you a great stay in Iran. Thanks for coming. در این بخش در ابتدا در خدمت آقای دکتر احسان اصناعشری دبیر محترم کنفرانس خواهیم بود تا این کنفرانس رو برای همگی ما بازگشایی بفرمایند. سپس سخنان پروفسور میلان رادوسلاورویچ از دانشگاه اسکاتلند رو میشنویم. خواهش میکنم دکتر اصناعشری رو تشویق بفرمایید تا در جایگاه حضور پیدا بکنند.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. عرض سلام و درود دارم خدمت همه حضار محترم، مسئولین ارجمند، مدیران گرامی، اساتید گرانقدر و دانشجویان عزیزی که در جمع هستند. خوشحالم که امروز در خدمتتون هستیم. قبل از اینکه من عرایزم آغاز بکنم جا داره که کسب اجازه بکنم از اساتید محترمی که به حمدالله تعدادشون در سالن کم نیست افتخار داشتم که در موارد زیادی دانشجوی این اساتید بودم و خوشحالم که امروز به عنوان دانشجو مجددا در خدمتشون هستم. اساتید گرانقدری از دانشگاه آزاد و دانشگاه سراسری در جمع حضور دارن. ممنون که تشریف آوردین، خیلی لطف کردین. خیر مقدم داشته باشم خدمت همه عزیزان که تشریف آوردین. خدا رو شکر میکنم که ما یک بار دیگه تونستیم دور هم جمع بشیم برای سومین بار در 3 سال گذشته یک کامیونیتی و جمعی رو تشکیل بدیم که بتونیم با هم دیگه این رشته مدیریت ساخت و مدیریت پروژه رو پیش ببریم و در بالندگی این رشته ها در کشورمون بتونیم سهمی داشته باشیم. به رسم مهمان نوازی من هم خواستم که خدمت مهمون خارجیمون یه خوش آمدی عرض بکنم به زبان انگلیسی، بعد مجددا عرایزم رو ادامه خواهم داد. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the conference organizing committee, I would like to expand my warm welcome to our international guest. I wish you have an enjoyable stay in Iran. Thank you for participating in the first international and third national conference of construction and project management. And I really hope that this opportunity can be considered as a starting point for future research collaboration. Thank you for coming. در مورد کنفرانس من یک سری توضیحاتی خدمتتون خواهم داد. در وهله اول باید بگم که خب به هر حال برگزاری هر همایشی بدون حمایت ارگان‌ها، سازمان‌ها، شرکت‌ها، دانشگاه‌ها طبعاً غیر ممکن خواهد بود. سازمان‌ها و شرکت‌های زیادی لطف کردن، حمایت کردن، ما رو مورد عنایت قرار دادن در این مدت که حالا خانم شمسیان توضیحات بیشتری خدمتتون خواهند داد. من نام نمیخوام ببرم، فقط تشکر میکنم از اینکه همایش‌های علمی رو مورد توجه دوستان هست و ما رو مورد حمایت و عنایت خودشون قرار دادن. بحثی که من میخواستم آغاز بکنم به عنوان بحث آغازی کنفرانس، محوریتش محور انسان هست. انسان در سازمان به عنوان اصلی ترین رکن همیشه در واقع نقش اساسی داشته و موفقیت ها و شکست هایی که در واقع در سازمان ها ما شاهد هستیم معمولاً وابسته هست به عوامل انسانی. علیرغم پیشرفت های تکنولوژیکی هم از لحاظ سخت افزاری و هم از نرم افزاری، کماکان انسان به عنوان تصمیم گیرنده و به عنوان کسی که خلاقیت رو میتونه در سیستم وارد بکنه مد توجه هست و مد نظر هست که جا داره که توجه حتی بیشتری هم در واقع به این موضوعات صورت بگیره، چرا که موفقیت سازمان ها و پروژه که به عنوان یک سازمان موقت ما ازش یاد میکنیم در واقع در گروه نیروی انسانی هستش که ما در سازمانمون در اختیار داریم. بحثی که در واقع روی منابع انسانی همیشه مطرح میشه بحث توسعه منابع انسانی هست و اینکه ما چطور بتونیم کارمندامون رو قابلیتشون رو بیشتر بکنیم، توانمندیاشون رو ارتقا ببخشیم که بتونن در اون مسیری که سازمان ما تعیین شده واسهش بتونن حرکت بکنن و به اهدافش دست پیدا بکنن. از Human Resource Development یاد میشه و اینکه ما در واقع توسعه انسان‌ها رو داشته باشیم و یکی از چیزهایی که خیلی هم مطالعات هم در واقع بحث‌های عملکردی و عملیاتی خیلی روش تمرکز دارن بحث کامپیتنسی یا شایستگی نیروی انسانی سازمان‌ها هست که از زیر مجموعه کامپیتنسی ما بحث در واقع نالج یا دانش رو داریم. دانش اون چیزی است که ما فرا گرفتیم و به عنوان دانستنی در پایگاه اطلاعاتی خودمون به صورت شخصی نگهداری میکنیم و در جایگاهی که بهش نیاز هست از اون میایم و استفاده میکنیم. خیلی زمینهای مختلفی رو دانش در سالیان اخیر در نوردیده. مثلا ما روی مدیریت دانش بحث داریم، روی در اختیار گرفتن دانش بحث داریم، روی اشتراک دانش بحث داریم و موارد خیلی زیادی رو در واقع شامل شده بحث نالج و این توجه به ارتقاء دانش نیروی انسانی سازمان باید در سند چشم‌انداز و اهداف استراتژیک سازمان‌ها گنجانده بشه. چرا؟ چون تمام سازمان‌های پیشرو و امروزی الان روی این زمینه تمرکز دارن، چون به این نتیجه رسیدن که اگه قرار تحول ایجاد بشه از طریق نرم افزار نیست، بیشتر یعنی از طریق نرم افزار، منظورم نرم افزار کامپیوتری یا مثلا سخت افزار کامپیوتری نیست، بحث انسانی هست و باید حتما روی این موضوع تمرکز بکنم. بنابراین جا داره که در اهداف استراتژیک سازمان‌ها ما بحث توسعه منابع انسانی و به خصوص توسعه دانش رو مد نظر قرار بدیم. و حالا ببینیم این دانشی که در موردش ما صحبت میکنیم چجوری میشه این دانش رو اختیار کرد و در اختیار گرفت. خب راه حل های سنتی زیادی وجود داره. ما در مورد دانشگاه ها، در مورد دوره های آموزشی، کورس های کوتاه مدت و روش هایی که در واقع میشناسیم، خب یکی از در واقع منابع دریافت دانش برای ما هست که خب هممون در دانشگاه شرکت کردیم، در دوره‌های مختلف لیسانس، فوق لیسانس و دکترا و این رو دانش رو به دست آوردیم. ولی خب این تنها روش نیست. ما روش‌های دیگه‌ای برای نالج ترانسفر و انتقال دانش هم متصور هستیم که یکیش همین کنفرانسی است که الان در واقع شما روش نشستید و مطالعات زیادی اتفاقا روی برگزاری کنفرانس‌های علمی شده و دیدن یکی از موثرترین هایی هست که میتونه کمک بکنه به مخصوصا کسایی که در صنعت فعال هستند دانش لازم رو برای در واقع مجموعه منابع انسانیشون فراهم بکنن. خب دوره‌های دانشگاهی، کورس‌ها خوبه، منتها هم از لحاظ هزینه هم از لحاظ صرف زمان یه سری محدودیت‌هایی رو برای نیروی انسانی ما ممکنه که ایجاد بکنه، اما کنفرانس ها در یک فضای محدود قابلیت این رو دارن که اطلاعات درجه 1 و بروزی رو به کارمندای ما در واقع منتقل بکنن. چطور به ما کنفرانس کمک میکنه؟ عرض بزرگ شما که یکیش از طریق در واقع شناخت قلمروهای جدید دانش هست، یعنی چیزایی که نکاتی که پیدا میشه توسط پژوهشگران و دانشمندان مورد مطالعه قرار میگیره و ما دریافت خواهیم داشت در موردشون تحقیقات انجام شده و به عنوان یک سری یافته‌های جدید ارائه میشه که این که از بهترین قسمت‌هایی هستش که در واقع کنفرانس به ما میده. ما اهداف در واقع کنفرانس اول و کنفرانس سوم رو در واقع بر مبنای همین مطالب بنا کردیم که شما تعدادش رو الان می‌بینید. نکته دومی که کنفرانس میتونه به ما بده بحث اشتراک قرار دادن تجربیاتی که به دست آوردیم و دانشی که در اختیار داریم با سایرین هست. ما برای اینکه بالنده بشیم، برای اینکه رشد بکنیم، باید که حتما این دانش رو به اشتراک بذاریم. هم برای خودمون این حسن ایجاد میکنه که ما در واقع به یک ویزدم و یک خرد بالاتری دست پیدا میکنیم، همین که بدنه در واقع صنعتی که توش داریم کار میکنیم رو ارتقا میبخشیم و این در کل در نهایت به نفع همگی خواهد بود. بنابراین اشتراک تجربیات و دانش رو ما در نظر قرار دادیم. جذب و جلب توجه مسئولین به این دو تا رشته مدیریت ساخت و مدیریت پروژه مد نظر بوده. این دو رشته همه ما میدونیم که پتانسیل فوق‌العاده بالایی برای کمک به پروژه ها، به فعالیت های ساخت داره و با توجه به ماهیت بین رشته‌ای که داره، یعنی از زمینه‌های مختلف قسمت‌هایی رو برداشت کرده، از مهندسی عمران برداشت کرده، از مدیریت عمومی برداشت کرده، از صنایع برداشت کرده، اینها در مجموع که کنار هم قرار گرفتن یک مجموعه کاملی رو به وجود آوردن که این میتونه کمک بکنه به پروژه ها برای اینکه موفقیت رو ما بتونیم به دست بیاریم و فکر می‌کنم خواسته هر رهبری باشه برای یک پروژه که موفقیت در واقع در گلو این هستش که ما بتونیم روی این رشته ها سرمایه گذاری انشالله انجام بدیم. هدف دیگه ای که مطرح بود، اگه میشه برگردونید اسلاید رو. بله همینجا، مرسی. هدف دیگه ای که ما داشتیم، یکی از اهداف بسیار مهم کلیه همایش‌های علمی هست که برگزار میشه و اون بحث شبکه سازی و نتورکینگ هست و آشنایی در واقع اهالی صنعت با اهالی دانشگاه، اساتید محترم، دانشجویان با صنعت، دانشجویان با اساتید دانشگاه‌های دیگه و این یک فرصت فوق‌العاده است که اینجا شما میتونید که با استفاده از روابطی که تنظیم میکنید برای آیندهتون برنامه‌ریزی مناسبی انجام بدید، هم از لحاظ حرفه‌ای و هم از لحاظ علمی. نکته دیگه، یعنی دو تا هدفی که جدیداً اضافه شد به اهداف ما در کنفرانس‌های مدیریت ساخت پروژه، بحث خارج شدن از پوسته داخلی بود و این که ما بتونیم با دانشگاه‌ها، با مؤسسات تحقیقاتی و آموزشی خارج از کشور هم رابطه داشته باشیم و بتونیم از کارهایی که اونها انجام دادن استفاده بکنیم، با اونها به نحوی شریک بشیم که ازشون بیاموزیم یا حتی چیزهایی که خودمون داریم، یعنی داشته‌های خودمون رو بتونیم باشون در واقع به اشتراک بذاریم، به اونها کمک بکنیم، هم اونها از ما استفاده بکنن از ما و همینجور که لینک ایجاد بکنیم با اساتید مطرح خارجیمون که در واقع زمینه‌های مختلف تحقیقاتی مخصوصا مطالب بروز دارن کار میکنن، مثل مهمان عزیزی که در خدمتشون هستیم، آقای پروفسور میلان، میتونن کمک بکنن به ما که یه مقداری از این محدوده خودمون خارج بشیم، بتونیم اون افق‌هایی که کشورهای دیگه هم در واقع دارن روش کاوش انجام میدن رو به اصطلاح بتونیم که انشالله داشته باشیم. در مورد خود کنفرانس اگه بخوام صحبت بکنم، کنفرانس امسال ما همونطور که شاید در برنامه‌ها دیده باشید در 2 روز برگزار میشه. روز اول که امروز در خدمتتون هستیم، بعد از مراسم افتتاحیه ما 3 تا پنل موازی خواهیم داشت که پنل سخنرانی بین المللی در همین سالن برگزار میشه و 2 تا سالن هم ما در طبقه تحتانی در اختیار داریم که سالن اجتماعات باشه و کلاس 3. عرض بزرگ شما که ما خب شاید تو برنامه‌ها اگر نگاه کرده باشید کلاس 4 رو ما داشتیم، تا با توجه به استقبالی که از کارگاه‌های تخصصی شده بود، ما در واقع با همکاری مجموعه محترم اندیشه تونستیم که یک فضای بزرگتری با تعداد بیشتری رو در اختیار بگیریم که دوستان بتونن که در اون ورکشاپ هم شرکت بکنن. در آمفی‌تئاتر ما سخنرانی‌های بین‌المللی و پژوهشی خواهیم داشت و در سالن اجتماعات و کلاس 3 هم که کارگاه‌ها همونطور که در برنامه‌هایی که در اختیارتون قرار داده شده اونجا توضیحات داده شده، اونجا در واقع میتونید که در ورکشاپ‌ها هم شرکت بکنید و روز اول ما تموم میشه. یه پذیرایی بعد از افتتاحیه داریم، یک نهار داریم و یک پذیرایی بعد از ظهر در خدمتتون هستیم. روز دوم هم تقریبا مشابه هستی سخنران کلیدی ارزشمند داریم، ایشون صحبت خواهند کرد و بعد از اون دوباره میریم رو پنل‌های ستایی موازی و بیشتر روز دوم سخنرانی ما در نظر گرفتیم، کما اینکه البته یک ورکشاپ مهم هم داریم که در مورد برنامه‌ریزی و کنترل پروژه هست که جزء در واقع دوره ارتقا پایه نظام مهندسی محسوب میشه برای اجرا و دوستانی که میخوان شرکت بکنن در اینجا، یعنی اگه میخوان گواهی رو بگیرن باید در این ورکشاپ حتما حضور داشته باشن. خواهشم این هستش که در ورکشاپ ها اگه حضور پیدا میکنید هر کدوم از اینها یک مسئول سالنی داره که اسامی رو یادداشت میکنه، حتما اساتیدتون اونجا ارائه بکنید و که ما بتونیم برای شما در واقع گواهینامه هم صادر بکنیم. بعد از سخنرانی‌های پژوهشی و یک کارگاه، سخنرانی ترویجی داریم که بیشتر از عزیزان دانشجو استفاده کردیم. دوست داریم که شما هم پرزنت بکنید، شما هم ارائه داشته باشین، تجربیاتی به دست بیارید و این فرصت بهترین موقعیت هست که براتون فراهم شده. امیدوارم که ازش بتونید که خوب استفاده بکنید و در پایان هم که مراسم افتتاحیه رو داریم ما انشالله تا ساعت 17 کارامون تموم خواهد شد. بعد از مراسم اختتامیه گواهی حضور و گواهی مقالات خدمتتون ارائه خواهد شد که تا انتها تشریف داشته باشید که اونها رو هم در اختیار بگیرید. در پایان من میخوام از این فرصت اولا استفاده بکنم از تیم 30 نفره‌ای که در برگزاری این کنفرانس ما رو یاری کردن. از هدایت‌های عالمانه آقای دکتر مجروحی ما خیلی استفاده کردیم و واقعا مزاحمشون بودیم. خودشون البته در واقع برگزار کننده و صاحب کنفرانس هستن ولی واقعا ایشون کمک‌های زیادی تو این زمینه کردن، تجربه‌شون برای من شخصا واقعا ارزشمند بود. از تیم اجراییمون تشکر می‌کنم، حداقل 7-8 نفر از بچه‌ها تقریبا 8-9 ماه درگیر این کنفرانس بودن که بتونن به بهترین شکل برای شما این شرایط رو فراهم بکنن و تیم 30 نفرمون که این یک هفته گذشته واقعا زحمت‌های زیادی کشیدن. من ازشون ممنونم، امیدوارم که همیشه سلامت و شاد باشن و امیدوارم که به هر حال تلاشی که انجام گرفته مورد توجهتون قرار بگیره و بتونید از برنامه‌ها بازدید بکنید، دیدن بکنید و بتونیم که انشالله همه هم کمک بکنیم که ارتقای صنعت ساخت در کشور رو شاهد باشیم. خیلی ممنونم از حضورتون، مجددا خوش آمد میگم. امیدوارم که 2 روز خیلی خوبی رو با هم دیگه داشته باشیم.
سپاسگزارم آقای دکتر. At this point, I have the honor to invite Professor Radoslav Levich from University of the West Scotland as our keynote speaker. Please join me to invite him to deliver his speech.
Right. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to say that I'm really honored to be here. And it's a pleasure being back in Tehran. I was first time in 2010, that's 6 years ago. I was enjoying then, I'm enjoying now. But in terms of my speaking, I'm kind of thinking, I don't particularly like the lecterns myself. So if I move around and if I talk like this, would you hear me at the back or not? Because I'm kind of, whenever I'm talking, yeah? Oh, here we go. That's better now, right? Okay, so, right, my name is Milan Radosavljević. Please, for everyone, call me Milan because Radosavljević is a really difficult surname to pronounce and people are then embarrassed and all that stuff, and you don't need to be embarrassed, don't worry about it. Milan is really easy to remember, and if anyone follows football, then they would remember by AC Milan, it's one of the clubs in Italy. It's not the club that I own, don't worry about it. I'm not that rich, I'm just academic. I'm originally not from Scotland. I originally come from Slovenia, which is, if you know former Yugoslavia, then you would know where approximately Slovenia is. But for the past 15 years, I've lived and worked in the UK, here and there. 6 years in Scotland, 7 years in England, and then I'm back now in Scotland for the past 3 years, where I'm Assistant Dean for Research and Enterprise in the School of Engineering and Computing within the University of the West of Scotland, which is a relatively young university. I'm saying relative because it is young on the paper, but in reality the Paisley Technical College dates back to 1897, so basically it is more than 100 years old. And if anyone knows anything about chaos theory and fractals, then they would know Louis Fried Richardson, who invented the fractal equations. And I then later on used them in my PhD, not knowing who this man was actually, and he was one of the principals of the Paisley Technical College. And then years later, doing my PhD with his work, I'm now working in Paisley. It's a really kind of coincidence how these things evolve. What are we proud of? We're particularly, because Paisley was a technical college, and now it's a University of the West of Scotland. We have 4 campuses, one in Paisley, one in Hamilton, one in Dumfries, and one in Ayr. There's actually now the 5th campus in London, and one of the 4 campuses, the one that I mentioned that is in Hamilton, is now moving about 20 kilometers away to a completely new facility where we're building state-of-the-art digital technologies laboratories for the future work, including the application of building information modeling and digital technologies in construction. So that's why we can't be called University of Paisley anymore, and it's University of the West of Scotland. And I am in the School of Engineering and Computing, which has the largest proportion of research and enterprise in the whole of the university. Is basically I am responsible for about 55% of all research and enterprise in the whole of the university, which accounts for roughly about 4 to 5 million pounds of research being done every single year. And the team behind me has been involved over the past few years in really prestigious projects. So at the moment we are, on behalf of the European Union, technically leading the development of the 5th generation mobile networks. And we have our own internal mobile network for these purposes, and there is a simple reason for that. When I said to the university that we are going to conduct cyber attacks on that mobile network to test its capabilities and future capabilities, they were not very pleased by that, because they didn't want university network to be attacked by our basically cyber researchers. So we had to create our own internal network just purely for research purposes, so that the big telecom companies can test vulnerabilities of mobile networks. So one of these things is we have the only such telecom network in the world. Basically no other university has got something of that sort. In addition, I'm not sure whether you know about the gravitational waves. A few months ago, before the new year, a team of more than 1,000 researchers around the world detected gravitational waves. It's a huge project that lasted over 50 years. And the mirrors that were being used for detection of gravitational waves were developed in Paisley with our really novel thin film vapor deposition technologies that we are using. And again, this is, young university, but a lot of really good things going on. And that is why I'm here, and I'm traveling around the world as well to form the links with universities, so that we can continue then in the future with research of this kind and help the societies become better, help our environment become more healthy, and for all of us to be much more sustainable and so on. When it comes to construction, this is the kind of the work that what you see in front of you, although everything is not very visible, but I'll explain what Bali acronym means. A lot of people, when I present Bali, think that this is an island in Indonesia where they go for seaside holidays. There is an island, but that's not what this is about. It's the acronym Bali stands for Built Asset Lifecycle Intelligence, and is basically the first step in the research that I'm doing with a private company in Scotland to develop the first of its kind digital ecosystem for whole life cycle management of projects, and that includes from design all the way to operation and maintenance within the digital world. And knowing anything about projects, you would know how difficult it is to manage construction and to manage design before construction, let alone then including operation and maintenance in the project. So it's a huge undertaking. Being sponsored, as you see, there are 3 logos at the top. One is UWS, so that's ourselves and my team behind me. Whole Life Consultants. WLC is a company, private company in Dundee, and it's a coincidental in one way or another, but it actually is quite intentional. That company is chaired and has been established by my PhD supervisor. So I know these guys really, really well. Yeah, we're like family. And when we started working on this project, it was on day one. We worked like we have worked for the past 20 years that I know these guys. And the third logo is Innovate UK. I'm not really sure how much you know about the Innovate UK and how much you know about the arrangement, knowledge transfer partnership arrangements in the UK, but Innovate UK is a government-funded body that funds industry-led research. So no blue sky research, everything needs to be industry-led. And that project is industry-led as well. It's the most successful program in the world. Knowledge transfer partnerships, which are part of that program, is the most successful program in the world of that kind. And it enables companies to innovate and bring the academic knowledge into the companies. But when I say academic knowledge, it means really practical knowledge, yeah? If you want to do something with business, it has to be practical, right? There's no problem with having blue sky research and having something really innovative and novel being developed, but it has to be practical at the end of the day, and the businesses and the organizations involved in these projects have to have something out of that. So, build asset lifecycle intelligence. Here you go. I can operate. So this is us. The 3 organizations are involved, and the third organization on the marketing side was the Bramble Consulting. Why did we need the, or why do we need actually, because we're continuing this research, why do we need the marketing organization in that project? When you're developing something new, right, there needs to be market for it. If there is no market for it, there is no point of developing something new. And in some cases, it means that basically you have to explore what the companies need, what the government needs, what the authorities, local authorities need, and so on, to be able to develop something that they will be really able to practically apply. And that's why we needed a marketing company to do the market assessment for us. A little bit of a background. When we talk about whole life cycle, right, we talk about 3 things in a nutshell. Yeah, the picture is far more complex than that, but of course, in a nutshell, you're talking about design, construction, and then operation and maintenance. That basically describes the whole life cycle of the project. Now, if you want to do that, if you want to manage asset intelligently throughout the life cycle, you need data, and you need certain levels of digitization. Without this, you won't be able to do it. It's just simply too much information. There's simply too much going on to be able to do it manually. You need digitization. There's no escape from that. The problem so far, the problem with solutions so far, has been that they were predominantly focusing on design, or some of them on construction. So anything that you know about BIM, so building information modeling in terms of the packages that you're using, revolves around Autodesk Revit, yeah? Or Trimble, or packages that are basically predominantly design packages. What we wanted to do is we wanted to start from somewhere else. We wanted to start from operation and maintenance. Right? Not from design. Now, if you do that, then you basically have to ask yourself a question. What exactly it is, what kind of information do you need, and what exactly it is that you need to digitize? Yeah? Because digitization is the first and fundamental requirement if you want to create any kind of built asset lifecycle intelligence. There's no question about that. But what to digitize? When I say digitization, What do we mean by that? Yeah, and as I said, it's not just about Revit, it's not just about the software packages that you're using, it's a far more than that. So if I go one by one now, when we talk about construction, right, there are traditional ways of how you construct your buildings, and traditional ways involve a lot of manual work. On construction sites of today, no matter which country you go to, you will see that there is still a lot of manual work going on with a very, very low level of digitization. And that means that you have very little information of what is actually happening on a construction site. I do regularly a little tests on construction sites in the UK. I go to the construction site, I go to the first team of laborers. I don't go to project manager, I go to laborers. And I ask them, what is your plan for today? What it is that you have to accomplish today? And you know what normally the answer is? Normally the answer is, it depends. Yeah? So it's really, really uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty still in the construction process, and that uncertainty needs to be kind of taken out of it. So that means that a lot of work that we're currently doing manually has to be digitized as well. This picture is from, I was there last week or a few days ago, I don't remember. I was traveling quite a lot over the past few days, basically, but I think it was last week. And it's from ETH Zurich. It's a technical university in Zurich where they are practicing and they're developing the robotic construction. So that means robotic precast concrete manufacturing rather than manual precast concrete manufacturing. And I'm not sure whether you can see that, but in the right-hand corner, there are two different heads that they're using. This is the old style head, piston head, and in the right side corner there is a new style piston head where they have installed sensors to monitor rheological properties of concrete as they're extruding the concrete column. It really becomes problematic when you're doing the 3D printing because concrete can collapse on itself because of the weight. So when you're pulling out, when you're extruding concrete, it needs to harden enough that you can continue extruding. If you're extruding too fast, it will collapse. If you're too slow, basically your concrete will harden in the head and in the pipes. So it's a really delicate operation. Why am I showing this to you? I'm showing it to you because that facility is in Switzerland, but the command room, the control room, is in Scotland. So we are remotely, basically monitoring and remotely operating the robotic facility in Switzerland. And similar kind of arrangements we have with some other universities around the world, including the Scottish Construction Innovation Centre, which is basically across the road from us, so it's not really remote, but still it's network solution, and we're controlling their robots and monitoring what kind of problems you might have with this. And you know what is the most fundamental problem with any kind of remote connectivity of devices? You think what that would be? It's internet connection, right? When you think about it, even if you have the factory somewhere in Switzerland and they have really, very fast fiber optic internet, but when you're connecting it to Scotland, a slight interruption of few seconds between the robotic head and your command room in Scotland, and you've ruined everything, right? So it really needs to work properly. But that's the kind of the level of digitization that you will see more and more in the future, right? Now that doesn't mean there's a very clear argument that I get from humanists about the implications of robotization of construction, and that has to do with jobs in construction. And we used the economists to find out what the implications of robotics would have on construction. And actually that doesn't, robotics will not reduce the number of people involved in construction at all. What it will do is the skill set will change completely. Not the number of people, but the skills will be different. And there will be much, much higher skills required for the future construction, right? More people, but with very, very high skills. So you'll need people in construction that can do programming. You'll need people in construction that can do the robotic operation, CNC machines and stuff like that, operators that you see in manufacturing and so on. The second thing, when we move into buildings, right? Buildings these days Some yes, some not, but you know, some of the new buildings are equipped with sensors, left, right, and center. You have temperature sensors, you have humidity sensors, you have motion sensors, you have all sorts of sensors that are being installed in buildings around us. And some of them are visible, some of them are not visible. So for instance, you know, when you go through the sliding doors to this building, for instance, it has the motion sensor installed, so it identifies that a person is approaching the building and so on. But you know, if you have the interconnected sensors, you know, the picture becomes much more complex. It's not that easy. You know, following what one sensor is doing is a completely different game to monitoring what a cluster of sensors or cluster of arrays of sensors are doing. How do you know that all the sensors are working properly? I mean, these days you have, for instance, self-calibrating sensors that are self-powered and self-calibrating, and sensors are becoming cheaper and cheaper by the day. But still, how do you know that they're working properly? You know, and as I said, you know, following one sensor is one thing. Following hundreds or thousands of sensors becomes a lot more difficult. The second problem, of course, is that not all buildings have sensors. You know, when I talk about digitization, it means what do you do with your existing buildings? Yeah, there is a statement made by someone, I don't remember who, but there's a statement in the UK that actually 80% of all the buildings that will exist in 2050 in the UK, it might be different in Iran, I have to admit that, because I don't know, you know, I see a lot of cranes actually go, you know, in Tehran, so you're building a lot of new stuff. But in the UK, in 2050, 80% of all the buildings already exist today. Which means the problem with digitization is not the new building, yeah, it's existing building. What do you digitize and for what purposes? What exactly do you want to achieve? Yeah, it's easy to say, oh, let's just put all the sensors in the buildings and monitor everything. But why? Why do you want to do that? Do you want to improve anything? For instance, energy efficiency? Do you want to reduce costs related to energy? Do you want to reduce the CO2 emissions and so on? There needs to be a valid reason, and particularly when you're talking to businesses, you know, they always ask you why. Why should I invest in that? There's no point, you know, if I don't have any benefits out of that. So you have to be very careful when you're suggesting. You know, consultants are really good. They would sell you everything, yeah? But there is a limit, yeah? Because you have to ask the question what exactly it is that you want to achieve here with digitization. This is an example, you know, it goes beyond built environment. This is an example from a village in the northeast of Scotland, very close to Aberdeen. You know Aberdeen, it's the oil city in the UK. So it's very close to Aberdeen, and basically because of a mistake they have made in the 1960s, and I can show you approximately what the mistake is, somewhere around here is a natural well. That means water, groundwater, naturally actually comes out to the surface. And there was someone who was, in double quotations, very clever, in the 1960s decided that that natural well is not good, yeah? So they blocked it. So they poured hundreds of cubics of meters of concrete into the natural well. And they closed it on, they closed it off, they sealed it off, right? That was 1960s. Of course, for 2-3 decades, nothing happened. But what happened, what started happening in the 1990s is that this whole slope, which is a few kilometers long, has started slipping down. There is a village at the top, and there are 2 further villages in this direction. You can't stop water. I'm sure you know about that. Every country in the world has got problems with floods. You cannot stop water. You seal it somewhere, it'll come out somewhere else. And of course, nature has a fabulous ability to punish you really severely when it's needed, okay? What it did was this: instead of having one natural well here, the water started coming out at several locations. And these locations, of course, change every time there is a downpour. And Scotland, being a tropical country, you can assume that there will be no rain, right? Yeah, you wish. It's raining almost every day there. So that means that in every season, every summer, the situation is different. Now, how on earth do you monitor that? Well, we work with these village people there, with the village community. We installed the sensors. This is the analog sensor here, but underneath, in the soil, we have digital sensors that are monitoring water table dynamics. They are monitoring the moisture in the soil and movement, lateral as well as the three-dimensional movement of soil. The problem is this is quite remote, okay? It's about 3-hour drive from Glasgow, because I live in Glasgow, and 3 hours driving every day, I don't fancy that, and you know, in the village don't really have the knowledge to be able to monitor the sensors and what is happening with the sensors. So you have to remotely connect to the sensors, and this is again a different level of digitalization that involves the combination of natural as well as the built environment. You know, no software packages exist that will be able to give you an opportunity to model this. Everything has to be created from scratch. And digitization of your natural environment becomes an even bigger problem. I mean, this is a typical example of geotechnical digitization, but is a very good example in terms of the difficulties that are associated with that. Another example is cities. You know, you've heard about the term, I'm sure, smart cities. It's, you know, now all over the world people are talking about smart cities, digitization of everything, and it's nice, and they, you know, like I'm doing now here. I'm showing you a very nice image, 3D image of a model. This is Prague, I think, in Czech Republic. And, but I'm not going to do what others are doing when they're saying, you know, we're modeling cities. Yeah, not really. This is just a very nice image, okay? The real model underneath, the data underneath, is far, far more complex. Just imagine how many businesses or organizations, or schools, or universities, or conference centers, all the different organizations that are just on that picture. How many different systems they're using, yeah? Systems for managing their accounts, systems for managing their buildings, systems for managing God knows what else, yeah? University systems. You go to any university and you'll see how many different systems universities are using. How do these systems talk to each other? If you talk about smart cities, then the fundamental requirement is that these systems are interoperable, that they talk to each other. Very often they don't. Very often they don't because they are not interoperable. It's a big problem with that, but very often they don't because they shouldn't. Right? When you're talking about, for instance, very secure data that, say, Ministry of Interior, police, and so on contain, why should that speak to other systems? And to what level should that speak to other systems? When you're talking about, you know, student system, university systems, when you have very highly secure student data, that shouldn't speak to other systems as well. So before you start even digitizing this, the question needs to again be asked, what exactly it is that you can digitize, what you shouldn't digitize, and what you can and should or shouldn't interconnect when you're talking about smart cities. Huge questions. And of course, different cities, different solutions, different problems. It's not like one solution that will address everything else. And in Prague, they learned this really hard way because they tried to interconnect the variety of different systems, and of course it didn't work. You know, IT, it's tough, yeah? And it will take probably another 20 years before these systems will be fully interoperable. So I asked quite a number of questions, and the reason I'm putting this slide on here is because when you talk about built asset lifecycle intelligence, and we talk about intelligence in general, is not so much about what you know, but what kind of questions you ask. You know, when you talk about data, you can actually have as much data as you want. You can have a lot of data about almost everything these days. Yeah. The question is, what do you do with this data? Yeah. What do you want to achieve? And that needs to be the first question you ask before you start doing anything in BIM, anything in digitization. What exactly it is that you want to achieve? Because otherwise it will be just overwhelming. Yeah? I mean, just giving you an example. Are there PhD students in the room? Yeah? So If I tell you do the literature review, yeah, of something, your immediate question back to me would be about what? Am I right? Because if I say do the literature review, there's so much literature these days around the world that if you want to read everything, you would probably need to be, I don't know, a superhuman that would live for another 10,000 years because you wouldn't be able to read everything. Even if you go and pinpoint a particular subject, and I ask you, read the literature on construction management. Again, a lifetime is not enough. So you need to focus, 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 and that's exactly the same here. You need to focus on what exactly it is that you as a business or you as an organization want to achieve, and then you go and digitize it. What I see very often today happening is that people are following fads. They're following kind of what is, what is currently as a, how would you call that? A fad, yeah. You know, what sells today? So building information modeling, yeah, let's model everything. And then my normal question to that is why? Why do you want to model that? What do you want to achieve? And of course, when you look at designers, the reason designers want to model, the reason they want to use the nice images is because they can sell them to their clients. Yeah? Okay, fair enough. But that doesn't require very rich data behind the scenes, okay? The reason facilities managers want to model is completely different. What they want to do is they want to minimize costs with operation and maintenance. So if you want to minimize costs with operation and maintenance, then you ask a question, what do you need to digitize to be able to minimize costs for operation and maintenance? And the number one cost factor in operation and maintenance is energy. Yeah? And when you start drilling it from that direction, then you start realizing that digitization is not necessarily that difficult. But if you say that you want to digitize everything, then you have problems. So ask the right questions. That's number one. And that will bring you the intelligence that is needed for the project. Now, coming back to the system, this was a little bit of a background. It really is a little bit, even though that I'm talking quite a lot now, but it is really a little bit of the background. There's a lot more behind that. Now coming to the system. So what did we want to achieve? What did we want to build? Well, what we realized is that there are already tools out there, yeah? There's no point reinventing the wheel. There are tools for design, there are tools that help you construct, there are tools that help you operate and manage facilities. You have CAFM systems for facilities managers and all the rest. All of that exists. What doesn't exist? Yeah? And again, asking the right question. What doesn't exist is an operating system where all of these tools come together and talk to each other. So a digital ecosystem doesn't exist. And having an analogy with operating systems, so for instance, when you use operating system, yeah, you by default expect that, for instance, if you use Microsoft Windows and you use the Microsoft Office, it's a default expectation that these packages will talk to each other, right? That you will be able to copy from Excel and paste in Word. It's a natural expectation. The reason this works is, well, one of the reasons is XML schema, but the reason is the operating system. You have operating system that enables software packages within that system to talk to each other. That's fundamentally what operating system is. And if you don't believe me, then try, if anyone is using Mac, try to use anything that was created in Mac in Windows, and you'll see what I mean. Yeah, it doesn't work because they're incompatible. Now that's what we wanted to achieve with Bali, not incompatibility, but what we wanted to achieve was here, is bring all the processes, and I'm careful here what I mean by that, yeah? Processes in construction project involve not just the digital processes, machine-to-machine processes. It's human-to-human. The majority of the processes in construction are actually human-to-human. The communication that happens between, say, construction manager and designer, and facilities managers and designers, and construction people, and project manager and construction manager, and site engineer and construction, and so on and so on. The reason why things happen is because people communicate. So that's what I mean by processes here. So you bring processes, hardware, and software resources under the same umbrella. So you have one digital ecosystem, almost like your operating system for construction, that enables you to use all of that within one system throughout the life cycle. And that means that we need to enable all of these systems within the digital ecosystem to talk to each other. So the information exchange needs to be seamless and smooth. There is a standard that exists out there and that vendors, software vendors, don't like. Yeah, and I know why they don't like it, because they can't earn money with that. It's an open standard. It's called IFC, Industry Foundation Classes. And Industry Foundation Classes enable you to have the information exchange in an open format between different software packages, regardless of whether you have that package or not. The IFC will enable you communication between the different packages. And that's what we wanted to build Bali on. Let me see what next slide is. The key premise of Bali is that it's not model-driven. It's communication-driven. It's process-driven. So the user interface that we designed is communication-centric. So right in the middle of the screen, you have communication. That's the fundamental requirement for any kind of digital ecosystem that is process-based to function. Yeah? This is why, for instance, when Autodesk and all of these companies that build design software packages, when they have added functionality, collaborative functionality, yeah? So if anyone is using Revit, you know that in Revit you have collaboration tab, where you can collaborate with other designers and other stakeholders. But this is an add-on, and that's a problem. Construction process as communication is not an add-on. That's the center, that's at the core. So Bali is basically based on communication. And what that looks like, when you look at this kind of user interface, you'll see that this is very similar to what social media are doing. So if you look at the social media platforms that exist today, and there's hundreds of platforms, and I'm sure here in Iran you have the variety of your own platforms, social media platforms. You know, when I was in China, few months ago, the last time, you know, I realized that they have social media platforms that I haven't even heard before about, yeah, they develop themselves, and so on and so on. You always realize when you look at the social media platform, they're always communication-centric, yeah? The middle bit of the screen is always about communication and sharing information and all the rest, not about model, and that's exactly what was missing in construction as well, in BIM, within the BIM world. The communication is missing. So instead of having model as a center, you have the communication panel as a center, but models are being added on, yeah? So when you copy-paste models in there, when you embed models in there, if they're IFC-based, yeah, that means it doesn't really matter what software packages you're using, it doesn't really matter what kind of a model it is, which version it is, the different software packages will be able to talk to each other just based on the IFC, right? And that's the big difference between tools and between the digital ecosystem as well, because it's communication-centric. What is next? What are the key advancements? Well, one of them is that the user defines what it wants to model. You remember the question I asked? What it is that you want to model and why? You define it. You're the user. You define what you want to model. We're not going to tell you, model this. The system allows you to do only this. No, no, no. It's you who define. You have your own profile, you create your own profile, and you decide what you want to model. It's communication-centric. I mentioned that, so social media style interface, and it's platform agnostic. So it doesn't really matter which operating system, it doesn't really matter which packages you're using. You don't need to buy the new package. A lot of companies, small and medium-sized enterprises, are particularly under pressure these days because the big companies are dictating what they need to buy. And they say, you need to buy this package and that package and that package and that package. And suddenly it becomes really expensive for SME. And it's not just about buying the package. It's about training as well. It costs a lot of money to actually maintain all of these different packages. And recently I spoke to Brookfield Multiplex, which is one of the big companies that builds Stadia and knows what else around the world. They're a really big Australian company. And I asked them how many different packages they use in their day-to-day operation to be able to do building information modeling. And their answer is 24. 24 different software packages. Now imagine one of their suppliers, small company that employs, I don't know, 5 people. They can't possibly afford to operate and maintain 24 different packages. So what that enables you to do, it doesn't matter. Even if you use only one software package, you'll still be able to communicate with other software packages and share information in an open standard format. You don't need to buy new software. Bali sends only the relevant information to participants based on their roles and the requirements of those roles. So each individual in Bali has got his or her own profile. It's profile defined. It's not defined by anything else. Your profile defines what it is that you see, not the other way around. Yeah? It combines human and machine intelligence. What do I mean by machine intelligence? Well, I told you about sensors. Because we capture information from sensors, we can then use this information from sensors to improve future designs. So we use that in hospitals. And you know, I was talking to people in hospitals, to doctors, and they were telling me every time they build a new hospital, that's in the UK, yeah? Every time they build a new hospital, they always build insufficient number of sockets, and they don't build and they don't put the equipment in the right places. So everything is wrongly designed, every time. And you kind of go, why don't they learn? And there is no feedback loop. So what we've created is automatic and autonomous modification of standard designs of operating theaters using just the information that we get from the sensors. So that the sensors are telling us how much walking doctors need to do to get to the equipment, how many sockets are in use, how many extension leads they're needing to actually use more sockets, and so on. You know, simple information like this to be able to determine better design of your operating theater for the future. Yeah? Because designers are building their designs on the basis of the standards that exist out there. But who says that the standards are adequate? Very often what you will see is that the standard tells you one thing, but the real life, when you see what's happening in reality, it's something completely different. And if you want to improve the design in the future, and if you want to improve the standard in the future, you need a feedback loop. And this is enabled here. It's not prescribed. It doesn't mean that you have to do it in that way, but you can if you want to. Well, I talked about facilitates knowledge and asset information exchanges and to be able to transform knowledge into intelligence. It produces and uses real-time data. So for instance, in Bali, we're also having the live monitoring of, you know, I mentioned sensors. So everything is live monitored. Everything is live feed. It's not a kind of a mirror image of what was happening last week or yesterday. No, no, it's live. Yeah, so we've embedded all of this live. Unfortunately, I can't test it here. I would be able to, I have the link, so I could be connecting to the server back in Scotland, but I tried it last night, and it doesn't work because it has to go through several hoops, through several networks, including our own network in Scotland. So even within the UK, when I try it doesn't always work because it's several hurdles that he has to go through. What is next? The concept. So what you see in the middle, and this is very different to the images that you will see elsewhere on building information modeling, is it's not a nice image. The central part of Bali is your Bali web service database. Yeah? And there is now a discussion. I have discussion with my research team, what kind of a database that needs to be. Does it need to be a relational database? Does it need to be a triple store database? It's a debate currently, right? It might be that it will be a combination of the relational and triple store characteristics. What I mean by the triple store is your search engines are a typical example of triple store databases, where basically you search using semantics, right? You put a term in there, and the search engine searches the object based on the term. So the triple store has got, and the reason why it's called the triple store, it has a database of triples, and the triple is your object, yeah, your predicate, and your subject. So when I say Milan is in the conference, that is your triple. Milan is an object, yeah, or a person in that case, yeah. Depends how you look at it. So it's a person who is means that's an action. I am here, yeah, or I am walking on the podium, and then in the conference is another subject, and that is basically where I am. So you have the combination of these three things, and when you put all of these combinations into your database, you create a triple store, and that's basically what search engines are. There are slight difficulties with the triple store for BIM, yeah? The reason for this is that within the BIM space, you don't actually only have simple objects, predicates, and subjects. You have the 3D visualization as well, and so on and so on. And that means that triple store as a database is not enough. You need relational capabilities as well. And then around this, you basically have two types of events. Monitoring events and change events, and then you have the stakeholders. And what Bali does is it brings all of that together. Yeah, monitoring event is monitoring of the sensors. Change event is capturing the information of sensors and potentially changing the future design or changing the operation and maintenance regime or whatever it is that you're trying to change. You can't see that, unfortunately, but I'll read it for you. The navigation that was designed, basically the navigation panel is very simple, and it was designed with the industry for simplicity reasons. So what you have right at the top is your login, then you have your wall, yeah, similar to the, as I said, social media designs, and then within the wall, when you go into the system, you have the 4 different tabs. The details, where you have the details about the actions that you have been taking and that require requests for approval. Then you have the models. You see the models are embedded. They're not it's not centered on the models. The models are embedded into the wall. Then you have the variety of different tools that you can use in order to change, to get the change into the system, and that needs approval. And then you have the general dashboard where you can monitor events like the sensory data that you get from temperature sensors, movement sensors, and so on. So that's basically how it looks like. And as I said, unfortunately, I can't live connect to that, but I'll be able to show you some screenshot images, and I'll send these screenshot images to Dr. Majruhi just to show how things will look like. And that's all. So I don't know how much over time I am, but basically what I want to say is that when you're doing research or when you're doing any kind of applications within the arena of building information modeling or digital technologies used in construction, remember one thing. If you don't remember anything else, remember one thing. Ask the right question. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for your interesting speech. ما قرار بود در خدمت پروفسور میکوش هایدو از دانشگاه بوداپست هم باشیم، ولی متاسفانه در فرودگاه برای ایشون مشکلی پیش اومد و نتونستند به ما بپیوندند. همونطور که دبیر محترم کنفرانس آقای دکتر اسماء اشری فرمودند، یک چنین کنفرانسی در این سطح قطعاً میسر نخواهد بود مگر با همکاری و همیاری سازمان‌ها و ارگان‌های مختلف که البته تعداد اندکیشون رو بنده نام میبرم. تشکر میکنم از طرف هیئت برگزاری کنفرانس از شهرداری محترم تهران، من جمله معاونت محترم شهرسازی، اداره کل معماری و شهرسازی شهرداری تهران، کمیسیون اجرای ماده 100 شهرداری تهران و شهرداری محترم منطقه 7، وزارت محترم راه و شهرسازی به خصوص دفتر تدوین مقررات ملی ساختمان، مرکز تحقیقات راه، مسکن و شهرسازی، نظام مهندسی استان تهران، سازمان مدیریت و برنامه‌ریزی کشور و مدیریت محترم فرهنگسرای اندیشه که میزبان ما هستند و البته کلیه سازمان‌ها و نهادهایی که از ما حمایت فرمودند. امروز مفتخریم که در خدمت اساتید گرانقدر دانشگاه آزاد اسلامی واحد تهران مرکزی و همچنین اعضای هیئت علمی مؤسسه آموزش عالی علاءالدوله سمنانی گرمسار هستیم. به افتخار تمامی این عزیزان و البته خودتون دستی به مهر و مهربانی بنوازید. پذیرایی مختصری در خارج از سالن تدارک دیده شده. صرف بفرمایید. خواهشمندم بر اساس برنامه‌ای که در پکیج‌هاتون تقدیم شده از پنل‌های سخنرانی و کارگاه‌های تخصصی شرکت بفرمایید. مقالات مختلفی از دانشگاه‌های مختلف مثل دانشگاه تهران، دانشگاه شهید بهشتی، دانشگاه علم و صنعت، دانشگاه تربیت مدرس، دانشگاه فردوسی مشهد، دانشگاه سمنان، کرمان و دانشگاه آزاد اسلامی واحد علوم تحقیقات، واحد دماوند، واحد یادگار امام، دانشگاه ایوانکی و مؤسسه آموزش عالی علاءالدوله سمنانی گرمسار به این کنفرانس ارسال شدند. خواهش میکنم استفاده بفرمایید. از تمامی حضار تقاضامندم در تمامی اوقات کارت کنفرانس همراهشون باشه. ممنون از حسن توجه همگی شما.